I spent 3 years building the perfect college application. Late shifts, AP classes, a story no one else could tell. My sister? She spent 3 minutes on the family laptop. 2 weeks later, there was a screaming celebration in our kitchen. Champagne, hugs, scholarship banners, and me, standing in the doorway, realizing I'd been erased by people who knew exactly what they were doing. I used to think hard work would be enough. That if I stayed late, raised my hand first, never missed a deadline and never asked for praise, someone would notice. Maybe even smile my way and say, "That's our girl." But in the Blake house, only one girl ever glowed. And it wasn't me. It was Emily, my younger sister. She didn't just walk into rooms, she floated. Her laughter bounced off the walls like sunshine. Teachers remembered her name even if she skipped class. Strangers called her darling in the grocery line. She was the kind of beautiful that made people kinder just by proximity. And me? I was the girl holding the camera in the Christmas photo. I was the one who edited her essays and handed her forgotten lunch bags with a tight-lipped smile. If love had a spotlight in our house, Emily stood in it. I stayed behind the curtain. That spring, Ashland bloomed early. The dogwoods outside my school window had already turned white, petals dancing like slow snow every time the breeze caught them. I had just gotten back my AP biology test. 97%, circled in red. A rare comment from Mr. Delaney at the top. Excellent work. I folded it once and slid it into my backpack, not expecting anyone to ask. At dinner, Emily announced she'd been named cheer captain. Mom clapped like she'd won the lottery. "Emily, that's incredible. Did Coach Reynolds tell you personally?" Emily beamed. "Said I was a natural leader." Dad looked up from his mashed potatoes. "That's my girl." Nobody asked how my day went. The silence pressed warm and familiar around me. I passed the peas. Our kitchen was pastel yellow, with little blue ceramic birds Mom bought at a craft fair years ago. The fridge was a collage of Emily's world. Certificates, photos, even a thank you note from the school principal after she organized a dance fundraiser. In the corner, almost hidden under a magnet shaped like a cupcake, was my National Honor Society pin. Crooked. That night, after washing dishes while Emily FaceTimed with her friends about uniforms and glitter spray, I changed into my Mel's Diner shirt and tied my apron over faded jeans. The night shift started at 7 o'clock and didn't end until the last table cleared. It smelled like burnt coffee and grilled onions and bleach. I didn't mind. There was comfort in repetition, in orders shouted and bills counted. I told myself it was temporary. I was saving for something better. Wellington University. It was my anchor, taped to the back of my closet door where no one could wrinkle it. Top neuroscience program, generous scholarships. Far from Ashland, far from you could be more like your sister. I had circled the essay deadline in Sharpie, October 31st. Only 6 months to go. At school, Ms. Jennings, our guidance counselor, gave me a brochure with a knowing smile. "This place looks like you," she said. "Sharp, quiet, driven." I smiled politely but tucked it away. I wasn't ready to let anyone see the soft parts of me hoping. That same week, after I'd cleaned the diner's milkshake machine for the 3rd time, I pulled out my laptop. It had a sticker peeling off the edge. Earned. Not given. I ran my thumb over it, a nervous habit. The screen glowed back at me. Blank document. Cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to tell the truth. But what did I know about truth? Every story I had felt small next to Emily's. She made the room spin with her charm. I swept floors. She got trophies. I stayed late. The words I needed, maybe they were hiding in the cracks of those long, quiet nights, between the clink of diner mugs and the low hum of a jukebox still playing 80s ballads. Or maybe I just hadn't lived the right story yet. "You could be more like your sister," Mom had said last week, her tone light, casual, as if offering helpful advice about shampoo brands. I hadn't replied, just nodded and kept stirring the pasta. But something inside me folded in on itself. I didn't know what it was yet, only that it had weight. The kind that settles in your chest and won't move, no matter how straight you sit. Later that night, I finished my shift and stepped into the alley behind Mel's. The air was warm, humming with crickets and the distant buzz of a streetlight. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes for just a second. That's when I heard it, a thud, a groan, the sound of something or someone hitting the pavement hard. When I turned, I saw a figure slumped near the dumpster, half hidden in shadow. His arm twitched once, then stilled. I froze. Some nights etch themselves into your bones. July 14th carved mine open like a quiet blade. Slow, deep, and unforgettable. The alley behind Mel's always smelled like burnt grease and sour coffee grounds. That night, the air hung thick, sticky with leftover heat from the day. Oregon's summer nights could be peaceful, almost sleepy, but not this one. The street lamp at the edge of the parking lot flickered like it couldn't make up its mind. Inside, the kitchen clanged with the usual last-hour noise. Fry baskets rising, silverware clattering, the final order slip curling out of the machine. It was almost closing. I was exhausted. My back ached from leaning over booths to wipe tables, and the tip money stuffed in my apron felt damp with sweat. Still, I liked this part of the night, the end, when everything began to hush. I grabbed the trash bag from under the counter and nudged the back door open with my hip. The hinges squealed a little. Outside, the alley waited, dark and uneven, framed by the brick wall of the building and the outline of the dumpster. I glanced at my phone, saw a missed call from Jasmine, and thought about texting her back later. Then I heard it. A strange, choked noise, like someone trying to cough but swallowing it halfway. My body stilled. I waited, ears straining in the quiet until it came again. A low groan, followed by something heavy hitting concrete. I dropped the bag and moved forward. My sneakers made soft scuffing sounds against the ground. Around the edge of the dumpster, where the light barely reached, I saw him. A man. Crumpled. Motionless, except for the erratic rise and fall of his chest. He was lying on his side, knees drawn in slightly, one arm twitching now and then. His face was pale, waxy in the half-light, and there was something about the way his mouth hung open that made my stomach twist. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind raced with useless thoughts. Is he drunk? Is he sick? Should I call someone? Then instinct kicked in. I spun around and ran back inside. "Mel!" I shouted, breath catching. "There's someone out back. He's not okay, I think." She blinked at me from behind the register, alarm blooming across her face. "Call 911. I was already dialing. My fingers trembled, but I managed to tell the dispatcher our address, the man's condition, that he was barely conscious, that he needed help. Then I went back. I don't know what I expected. Maybe for him to be gone, like some awful mirage. But he was still there, still breathing, barely. I knelt beside him on the concrete. The warmth from the ground had already seeped into his shirt. His eyelids fluttered, and his lips moved. I took his hand without thinking. It felt clammy, cold in a way that didn't make sense in summer. "You're okay," I said, voice shaking. "You're gonna be okay. Help is coming." His eyes didn't focus, but he whispered something. I leaned in, catching bits between the gasps. "Kids. Got kids." The words hit me like a weight I wasn't ready to carry. "You're going to see them again," I whispered. "You stay with me, okay? You hold on." His fingers twitched slightly in mine. That was all. The alley was silent except for our breathing and the faint buzz of the broken light. I could hear my own heart louder than anything else. Then the distant whine of sirens split the air. I exhaled, relief and fear tangling in my throat. When the ambulance pulled up, the EMTs moved quickly, expertly. One checked his pulse, another started oxygen. They worked around me like I was furniture, but not unkindly. "You found him?" one asked, a woman, calm but brisk. I nodded. I was still holding his hand. I hadn't even realized it. "You probably saved his life," she said, glancing up. "You made the difference tonight." I didn't respond. I just watched as they lifted him into the gurney and slid him into the back of the ambulance. Then they were gone. I stood alone in the alley, surrounded by a silence that now felt holy. When I went back inside, Mel looked up from the mop bucket. "You all right?" she asked gently. "I think so," I said. But my voice didn't sound like mine. I washed my hands for a long time. The water was hot. Too hot, but I didn't turn it down. I scrubbed until my knuckles burned, until the lemon-scented soap filled my nose, until the touch of his skin left mine. Mel offered to give me a ride home, but I told her I'd walk. I needed the quiet. The sky was navy blue now, stars just beginning to blink through. Every step I took felt oddly light and heavy at once. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. It clicked once every few rotations like a heartbeat. I thought about his voice, how soft it had sounded, how human, how scared. Kids. He could have been my dad, my neighbor, a stranger I passed at the gas station, and no one would have found him if I hadn't taken the trash out 5 minutes later than usual. I didn't tell anyone. Not Mom, not Emily, not even Jasmine. It felt like a secret the universe gave me, a moment where I'd done something that mattered, even if no one knew. 4 days later, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank document. I stared at it for a long time, the memory still fresh like a wound that hadn't scabbed. Then, slowly, I typed. The night I almost didn't go to work changed everything. My essay wasn't just a story. It was the first time I believed my words had weight. Not the kind you carry on your back, but the kind that holds you steady, quiet, grounded, and real. October brought cooler mornings to Ashland. Leaves drifted down like silent reminders that everything changes eventually. My room smelled like coffee, notebook paper, and highlighters that had dried out weeks ago. I kept rereading the same opening line, changing a word here, removing a comma there, only to put it back. 12 versions lived in a folder named Wellington Final Maybe on my laptop. I couldn't stop thinking about that night in the alley. The man's voice still echoed in my head sometimes when I closed my eyes. I hadn't told anyone, but now it was on the screen in front of me. His twitching hand, the way his chest rose in uneven beats, how small his whisper had sounded. Kids. Kids. I hadn't meant to cry while writing it, but when I got to that part, my fingers froze. Then, slowly, I typed it anyway. I brought the draft to Miss Jennings one afternoon during free period. She read it silently, eyebrows furrowed, mouth pressed in a thin line. When she looked up, her voice was softer than usual. "This feels like truth, Naomi." I nodded, throat tight. She handed it back, her fingers pausing over the margin. "Leave it messy, if you have to. Let it breathe." So I did. I even left the typo I hadn't noticed until my 5th read. Resuscitation. I'd meant resuscitation, but the mistake felt human. And somehow it belonged. It was a piece of that night. Unfiltered, imperfect, mine. At home, I worked on the final version during late hours, when the house had gone quiet. Emily was usually upstairs, FaceTiming her cheer squad or scrolling through prom photos. Dad watched sports on mute, while Mom reorganized spice jars she rarely used. No one asked how my application was going, not even when I printed out my transcript or when the Wi-Fi cut during a submission test run. The family laptop stayed on the kitchen counter, open for anyone to use. Mine was old and finicky, so sometimes I borrowed it to double-check formatting or back up files. One night, as I added my final line, "Some stories don't get heard," I almost didn't tell mine. Emily wandered into the kitchen. She leaned over the counter, her blonde hair still curled from school photos earlier that day. "What are you working on?" I closed the screen a little too fast. "College essay," I said. "Oh," she said, wrinkling her nose. "I haven't even started mine. Deadlines suck." I didn't offer help. Not because I didn't want to, well, maybe partly, but also because it felt like this one thing, this single slice of myself, needed to stay mine. Later that week, she asked if she could use the laptop. I was brushing my teeth at the time and mumbled, "Yeah," between swishes of mouthwash. I didn't think twice. That evening, I lay in bed, scrolling through the Wellington application page, rereading everything one last time before I clicked submit. I stared at the glowing blue send button for a full minute before I finally exhaled and pressed it. I thought I'd feel something right away. Relief, joy, maybe even a little pride. But mostly I felt exposed, like I'd handed a part of myself to a machine and just had to wait and see if anyone cared. The days after submission were quiet. I filled them with school, work, and rewatching old science documentaries on YouTube. Anything to keep my mind from spinning. Emily complained one night about not knowing what to write for her essay. "I wish they just let us submit our GPA and move on," she said, half laughing as she tossed her phone on the couch. "I mean, what am I supposed to write about? How hard it is being popular?" Mom laughed too. "You'll come up with something. You always do." I said nothing, choosing instead to rinse the dishes harder than necessary. A few nights later, around 2 a.m., I woke up for no reason. My room was cold, the blankets twisted around my legs. I padded out to the kitchen for water, my footsteps quiet against the hardwood floor. The family laptop was missing from the counter. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe Dad was using it in the living room, but the couch was empty. The hallway light was off. I stood there for a long minute, the water glass sweating in my hand. The kitchen felt still, too still. I didn't know it yet, but something had already shifted. Something I wouldn't see clearly until much later. But in that moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where the laptop usually sat, its usual hum now gone, like a heart that had stopped beating. My essay wasn't just a story. It was the first time I believed my words had weight. Not the kind you carry on your back, but the kind that holds you steady, quiet, grounded, and real. October brought cooler mornings to Ashland. Leaves drifted down like silent reminders that everything changes eventually. My room smelled like coffee, notebook paper, and highlighters that had dried out weeks ago. I kept rereading the same opening line, changing a word here, removing a comma there, only to put it back. 12 versions lived in a folder named Wellington Final Maybe on my laptop. I couldn't stop thinking about that night in the alley. The man's voice still echoed in my head sometimes when I closed my eyes. I hadn't told anyone, but now it was on the screen in front of me. His twitching hand, the way his chest rose in uneven beats, how small his whisper had sounded. Kids. I got kids. I hadn't meant to cry while writing it, but when I got to that part, my fingers froze. Then, slowly, I typed it anyway. I brought the draft to Miss Jennings one afternoon during free period. She read it silently, eyebrows furrowed, mouth pressed in a thin line. When she looked up, her voice was softer than usual. "This feels like truth, Naomi." I nodded, throat tight. She handed it back, her fingers pausing over the margin. "Leave it messy, if you have to. Let it breathe." So I did. I even left the typo I hadn't noticed until my fifth read. Resuscitation. I'd meant resuscitation, but the mistake felt human. And somehow it belonged. It was a piece of that night. Unfiltered, imperfect, mine. At home, I worked on the final version during late hours, when the house had gone quiet. Emily was usually upstairs, FaceTiming her cheer squad or scrolling through prom photos. Dad watched sports on mute, while Mom reorganized spice jars she rarely used. No one asked how my application was going, not even when I printed out my transcript or when the Wi-Fi cut during a submission test run. The family laptop stayed on the kitchen counter, open for anyone to use. Mine was old and finicky, so sometimes I borrowed it to double-check formatting or back up files. One night, as I added my final line, "Some stories don't get heard," I almost didn't tell mine. Emily wandered into the kitchen. She leaned over the counter, her blonde hair still curled from school photos earlier that day. "What are you working on?" I closed the screen a little too fast. "College essay," I said. "Oh," she said, wrinkling her nose. "I haven't even started mine. Deadlines suck." I didn't offer help. Not because I didn't want to, well, maybe partly, but also because it felt like this one thing, this single slice of myself, needed to stay mine. Later that week, she asked if she could use the laptop. I was brushing my teeth at the time and mumbled, "Yeah," between swishes of mouthwash. I didn't think twice. That evening, I lay in bed, scrolling through the Wellington application page, rereading everything one last time before I clicked submit. I stared at the glowing blue send button for a full minute before I finally exhaled and pressed it. I thought I'd feel something right away. Relief, joy, maybe even a little pride. But mostly I felt exposed, like I'd handed a part of myself to a machine and just had to wait and see if anyone cared. The days after submission were quiet. I filled them with school, work, and rewatching old science documentaries on YouTube. Anything to keep my mind from spinning. Emily complained one night about not knowing what to write for her essay. "I wish they just let us submit our GPA and move on," she said, half laughing as she tossed her phone on the couch. "I mean, what am I supposed to write about? How hard it is being popular?" Mom laughed too. "You'll come up with something. You always do." I said nothing, choosing instead to rinse the dishes harder than necessary. A few nights later, around 2 a.m., I woke up for no reason. My room was cold, the blankets twisted around my legs. I padded out to the kitchen for water, my footsteps quiet against the hardwood floor. The family laptop was missing from the counter. At first I thought nothing of it. Maybe Dad was using it in the living room, but the couch was empty. The hallway light was off. I stood there for a long minute, the water glass sweating in my hand. The kitchen felt still, too still. I didn't know it yet, but something had already shifted. Something I wouldn't see clearly until much later. But in that moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where the laptop usually sat, its usual hum now gone, like a heart that had stopped beating. I double-clicked, line for line, paragraph for paragraph. She hadn't even changed the formatting. Even the typo was still there. Resuscitation instead of resuscitation. The one I had noticed and intentionally left. Like a scar I chose to show. My fingers tightened around the mouse. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just printed both versions, hers and mine. When the printer finished, I gathered the warm pages, holding them like evidence. Downstairs, the celebration had gained volume. I could hear clinking glasses and Emily talking about dorm life. My feet made no sound on the stairs. I placed the two versions side by side on the kitchen table. Nobody noticed at first. I stood for a moment, just watching the light flicker over the printed words. They looked so innocent, just ink and paper. But to me, they were everything. They were mine. Eventually, Dad noticed the papers. "Naomi, what's—" But I didn't wait to hear the end of the sentence. I turned and walked away. Back upstairs, I changed into sweatpants and sat cross-legged on my bed. The rejection email was still open on my own laptop, the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence like it was waiting for me to revise my life. Outside my window, the wind picked up. Cherry petals danced across the driveway. Somewhere down the block, someone's dog barked twice and went silent. My phone buzzed. "You okay?" "Jasmine." I heard Emily got in too. I didn't reply. Because there are some moments you don't explain. You don't narrate them, or tweet them, or even whisper them. You just live through them. One slow breath at a time. Tomorrow I would say something. Tonight, I let silence hold me. Chapter 5. The kitchen table. I placed the truth between us in black ink and 12-point Times New Roman. No one even flinched. It was morning. March 13th. The filtered light from the kitchen window spilled across the counter, catching the edge of the cereal box like a spotlight no one asked for. The toaster clicked softly. Coffee brewed in its slow, steady rhythm. And there, in the center of the table, lay two printed essays, stacked neatly, identical in every word, every line, even the typo. Emily walked in first, yawning. She wore one of Dad's old t-shirts and fuzzy socks, hair in a messy bun. She poured a bowl of cereal without a second glance at the table. I waited. Mom followed next, in her usual cardigan and slippers, checking her phone. "Naomi, don't forget, trash goes out today." Dad trailed behind, holding the mail. Nobody noticed the papers. "Sit," I said, voice flat. "Please." They looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. "I need you all to sit." Something in my tone made them pause. Mom set her phone down. Emily raised one eyebrow but didn't object. Dad sighed and eased into his chair like he was preparing for a commercial break. I pointed to the pages. "Read them." Emily's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "What is this?" I said read. She glanced down. Dad adjusted his glasses. Mom leaned in. There was a stretch of silence so thick it felt like fog had entered the room. Then Mom spoke. "Is this your essay?" "It was," I said. Emily's lip curled, just a little. "You left it open on the shared laptop. That doesn't make it yours." "You weren't going to get in anyway," she said, tone so casual it felt like a slap. "You stress too much in your writing. You overthink everything. And you steal." She rolled her eyes. "Naomi, come on. It's not that serious. We're sisters." "Sisters don't erase each other," I whispered. Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not bring drama into the house." I turned to him. "This isn't drama. It's betrayal." He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he looked down at the mail again like it held something urgent. It didn't. Mom straightened her shoulders. "Sweetheart, I understand you're upset." "Do you?" She held up a hand. But you left it accessible. And maybe next time, if it's that important, you should password protect your work. I stared at her. That's what she had to say? Not, I'm sorry. Not, this isn't right. Just a lesson in digital privacy. Something inside me cracked. Not loud, not visible, but final. I spent months writing that essay, I said. I wrote it with my hands shaking. I put in pieces of myself I'd never said out loud before. No one replied. And you? I turned to Emily. You took that like it was nothing. You didn't even change a single word. You didn't even try to make it yours. She shrugged. Because it worked. The room felt colder than it had 5 minutes ago. The morning light no longer looked soft. It looked clinical, surgical, like it was dissecting me in real time. I nodded slowly, then turned and walked upstairs. My room was still dim, the blinds closed halfway. Dust floated in the light beams like slow snow. I sat on the edge of the bed and let silence settle in my chest before moving. I sat there, hands resting on my knees, the soft hum of the neighbor's lawnmower drifting in through the window. Everything in my room looked the same, but none of it felt like mine anymore. Not the dusty trophies on the shelf, not the postcards I used to collect, not the lavender candle that had burned halfway down last December. Even the air felt borrowed, like I had already moved out, and my ghost was still living here, unaware. I let myself remember a different version of Emily, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who cried when I scraped my knee and gave me the better half of her Halloween candy, the girl who used to braid my hair and say it made me look like a movie star. I missed that Emily. I grieved her quietly in that moment, not the thief sitting in the kitchen, but the sister I thought I had. But grief didn't change facts. Love didn't undo damage. And memory wasn't enough to make me stay. So I stood, and I kept packing. In my closet, I pulled out the 2 backpacks I used on rotation for school. One was fraying at the straps. The other had a keychain Jasmine gave me in sophomore year, a tiny stuffed neuron. I opened my top drawer and took out the emergency stash. $200 in cash, birthday gifts from 2 years' worth of relatives who didn't know what else to give. I rolled up 2 t-shirts, a pair of jeans, socks, the hoodie I wore during finals. I packed a toothbrush, deodorant, and the blue spiral notebook where I wrote down quotes I liked from books and songs. On my desk, there was a photo frame. Emily and I, maybe 9 and 10, arms around each other at the county fair. We had matching cotton candy. Our teeth were blue. I remembered how we'd screamed on the Ferris wheel, how she'd held my hand and squeezed it even when she pretended not to be scared. I looked at the photo for a long time. Then I opened the back, slid the picture out, and dropped it in the trash. No dramatics, no music swelling in the background. Just a quiet decision. Before leaving, I paused. My fingers grazed the edge of my bookshelf, where I kept a stack of index cards. On the top one was a quote I once copied down from an old librarian. When they don't see you, make sure you see yourself. I tucked it in my pocket. Downstairs, the essays were still on the table. No one had moved them. Mom was rinsing a mug in the sink. Dad had gone outside to get the newspaper. Emily scrolled through her phone like the conversation had never happened. I didn't say goodbye. I pulled out my phone and texted Jasmine. Still got that couch? She replied seconds later. It's yours until you don't need it anymore. I smiled. It was the first one that felt real in days. I zipped my bags and slipped out the front door. The air smelled like thawing earth and cheap laundry detergent. Someone on the block was doing a load. I walked past the cherry tree, its branches drooping with bloom. Petals stuck to the soles of my sneakers as I moved toward the sidewalk. There was no grand exit, no final scream. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. They invited me back to the place that once erased me. This time I walked in through the front door. The conference badge around my neck read, Naomi Blake, founder and CEO, MindNest. A small rectangle of laminated confidence. I tightened the strap once, then again, just for the feel of it. My heels clicked across the tile in the main hall. Sharp, steady, mine. Wellington University looked shinier than I remembered. Polished walls, glowing sponsor signs, a welcome table stacked with canvas tote bags and logo pens. I passed booths with recycled lanyard designs, VR demos for teen therapy, an AI grief companion named Cora. Everyone looked polished. Everyone looked important, including me. My navy suit fit just right. My curls held their shape. I clutched a compostable coffee cup in one hand and my phone in the other, waiting for my nerves to catch up. Backstage, I paced. The low hum of jazz filtered in through the curtains. Behind me, a projector screen scrolled through my keynote deck. Slide 1. Rebuilding from the bottom up. My nest and the future of youth resilience. I touched the corner of my old laptop, tucked behind my materials. The sticker still clung to it after all these years. Earned. Not given. Jasmine FaceTimed me from Portland, her screen tilted sideways. You ready to be brilliant? I smiled. I'm terrified. Good. Means it matters. We hung up. The event organizer, clipboard, headset, well-meaning smile, gave me a thumbs up. Mic check in 2. You're up right after the student wellness panel. I nodded, and then the moment came. I stepped into the spotlight. Rows of faces blurred before me. Some tilted forward, some scribbled in notebooks, others holding branded water bottles and blinking up at me with polite interest. But one face stood out immediately. Second row, third seat from the left. Emily. Her hair was shorter. Her eyes were tired. The glow was gone, replaced by something hollow. Her mouth didn't move. She just stared. I didn't flinch. The clicker was in my hand. The first slide lit up behind me. 6 years ago, I began, I applied to this university. My voice was calm. I'd practiced the tone. Honest, steady, warm, not angry, not bitter. I didn't get in. I thought I wasn't enough. Slide 2. A sketch of Mine Nest's early wireframes, drawn in a spiral notebook from my dorm bed at Evergreen State. But failure didn't break me. It built me. Slide 3. Photos of my co-founders, our first scrappy workspace, notes from our initial VC pitch. One of them had written, raw, but real, across the top in red marker. I talked about teen anxiety, our pilot study with Portland Public Schools, the time our server crashed from too many downloads in a single night. I talked about doubt and long hours and the quiet mornings when I almost gave up. I never mentioned Emily, but when I said, I was once told I wasn't enough. But failure doesn't end you. It teaches you how to build. I looked directly at her, and for a flicker of a second, she blinked, then looked away. Applause. Afterward, people swarmed. Someone from NPR handed me a card. A startup founder asked to collab. A counselor from Florida hugged me, and then she came. Emily stood a few feet away, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her purse. Her mascara had smudged. She looked up at me like we hadn't grown in opposite directions. You really built all this? She asked. I held her gaze. My voice was quiet but clear. Yeah, with my own words this time. She nodded once. No apology. No excuses. Just that. I didn't wait for more. I turned, walked toward the main doors. My heels echoed across the tile, each step steady, strong. This time, the sound didn't scare me. 2 days later, on a podcast interview recorded in a quiet Portland studio, I answered a final question with a smile. You don't need revenge, just a future where they don't matter anymore. There was a time I thought silence would protect me, that walking away meant losing. But now I know. Some doors are meant to close, so we can learn how to build our own. Sometimes, the people who should have seen us first are the ones who see us last. And still, it's okay to grow past them. What we earn with honesty, we carry with quiet strength. We don't need to take back what was stolen, only to create something better in its place. If this story reminded you of your own journey, or of someone you once loved quietly, I hope you'll share it. Maybe someone out there needs to hear it too. Have you ever walked away, not out of anger, but out of self-respect? Or kept quiet, even when your heart was shouting? I'd love to hear your story. Just a line, a moment, anything. Sometimes the smallest truths connect us in the biggest ways.